Hi everyone, Sara Azari, criminal trial attorney and legal analyst on NewsNation, also the host of Serving Justice on NewsNation. I'm here on week 3, day 2 of testimony in the prosecution's case in the trial against Sean Combs. Today we heard continued testimony by his former assistant David James, who was the personal assistant to Sean Combs for 2 years. And, you know, we're starting to see evidence of a criminal enterprise. So this is a guy who was one of many people in his entourage who was advancing hotel rooms, and he clarified that that doesn't mean actually booking the hotel rooms, but rather supplying Combs with what he needed. Interestingly, he testified that there was always a Louis Vuitton bag that Combs carried with $10,000 in cash. Remember that when they raided his hotel room in New York and arrested him on the charges in this case, he had $9,000 in cash, which was passed around to the jury the other day. So he is part of this enterprise, and it was interesting because the defense tried to elicit testimony that perhaps he was given immunity, you know, and they weren't able to elicit that testimony, but he likely probably got immunity to be able to testify against Diddy. What was really most interesting about his testimony was that he testified to a pattern of blackmail, that there was a time when Diddy suspected that somebody had stolen something. He hated people stealing things, and that he had everybody take lie detector tests, and that he said to him, to Mr. James, that I have tapes showing you taking drugs. There was just a couple of occasions where this assistant, had used the drugs that he'd gotten for Diddy, and so he said, essentially threatening him, you know, I'm going to keep those tapes in case I need it. So again, it shows a pattern of blackmail. These are all sort of go to the method and means of the enterprise and how the racketeering was carried out. But I think the most important thing out of his testimony was about the Mel's Diner Suge Knight incident. That is the incident that had him so scared for his life that he actually quit his job after 2 years. He said that even though that was the only time that he had seen Combs with guns, this was a situation where he felt his life was in danger, where 3 men, 3 guns, he's the driver of the car, drive over to essentially have a mob-style confrontation with Suge Knight and his entourage. We're starting to now see a little bit more of that mob undertone of a RICO case. You know, this was almost going to be, potentially could have been a murder case had the guys not left the diner. So when they drive up, the Escalades are gone and everything sort of de-escalates and they come back. We also heard from Regina Ventura, who's Cassie Ventura's mother. You know, she testified and laid the foundation to bruising that she photographed on Cassie's body. She testified about a time when Combs took her phone and wouldn't give it back to her, a time where $20,000 was demanded of her in order not to release sex tapes, where she took out a home equity loan to pay the $20,000. Ultimately, that $20,000 was returned by Combs's bookkeeper to Regina Ventura, but nonetheless, it was demanded. So again, we're seeing these predicate acts of bribery, of blackmail, these things that go to the method and means of the enterprise for the racketeering charge. And let me tell you, the racketeering charge is the most important charge in this indictment. It carries 20 years to life. That's why the prosecution tries to elicit as much as they can, bits and pieces from each witness to set up the elements of racketeering conspiracy against Sean Combs. Now, I think what's interesting for many of you out there is you might be asking yourselves, why did the defense not cross-examine Regina Ventura? That's kind of weak. Don't they need to challenge her testimony? Yes, but sometimes we leave bad alone and we leave it to argument. And that's what I saw with her testimony. She is her mother, right? And she did see evidence of abuse on her daughter. So I think the defense felt like it's better for them to reserve what they have for argument, and perhaps they have other witnesses and evidence that would impeach Regina Ventura's testimony down the line. But they said, we have no questions of this witness, and that allows them later to argue that maybe she's the mother, she's biased, you shouldn't really give her testimony all that weight. And the day ended very colorfully with the testimony of the Punisher, Sheree Hayes, who is one of the male escorts that Cassie and Diddy had hired to essentially engage in these sex scenes with Cassie. The Punisher testified that he didn't believe that Cassie felt coerced, that even one time she appeared to be enjoying what they were doing, but that the entire thing was being directed by Sean Combs, who was in a face covering and would essentially sit back, masturbate, pace around, masturbate some more, and give direction as to how the scenes should be played out. Again, I think the idea that he did not witness coercion, he did not believe Cassie was coerced, that might help the defense some, but the theory of coercion that this prosecution is going after is a coercively controlling relationship. It's not something where, like a coercion in a date rape, for example. It's not an isolated incident. It's not like they're saying that Combs put a gun to Cassie's head, forced her to have sex with these male escorts. It's more that the relationship was a long relationship that was coercively controlled. And so, the fact that this male escort didn't witness any coercion or didn't feel any coercion, felt like it was consensual, I don't think it's worth all that much for the defense. At the end, this comes down to whether this jury is able to set aside a bad guy who was using drugs, is abusive to his girlfriend, was really abusive of his power around the people, with the people that he was surrounded by. And are we going to be able to set aside this morally ugly guy, right, and look at the elements of the charges in the indictment against him? Or are we going to conflate the issues and say, he's such a pig, he did these horrible things, that, yeah, these are predicate acts for a racketeering charge, and he should go serve 20 to life in prison. That's all I got for today. I'll be back tomorrow right here in front of the courthouse giving analysis on the Diddy trial. Stay with NewsNation for all the updates in this case.